the best advice ever. And this is something that I think all of these all this advice that I share, this is personal. It always comes from a real place. And this week's best advice ever is simply put yourself on. Put yourself on. Stop waiting around for someone to give you the nod, for somebody to give you the thumbs up. Man, do it yourself. I just got a text from a family member of mine that's doing stand-up. And it's basically asking about, how do you get bookings? I'm out here. How much time do I need? And how do I get bookings? I'm actually going to make some YouTube content around this, because not only did I get that text from a family member, I got a call from a fellow speaker that's saying, "Hey man, I want to jump back out here in this comedy world. What are some of the things?" So I want to give everybody this advice. I'm a person. I have an abundance mindset. There's enough for all of us. I have no problem helping you shine. It takes no shine away from me. And that goes back to the best advice. Put yourself on. Stop waiting for someone to validate you, someone to put the stamp of approval on you. Go get it done. Stop waiting for permission. Stop waiting for a seat at the table. Build your own table. And I know it's hard. It's hard to buy lumber. Where do you get lumber from? And then you got to get something to cut the lumber with. And you got to get stain. And you got to get paint. And you got to sand it so there's not splinters in the wood, so you can sit down at the table. I understand all that is laborious. All that is tedious and cumbersome. However, it's gratifying. It's satisfying. It's fulfilling. If you create something and you execute a plan, you will succeed beyond your wildest dreams. I just had this experience with the show that I just had, the Big Dead Energy here in Columbia. I just got the check from the ticket sales. Holy smokes. Holy moly. The amount of the check that we made for this event far exceeds any, when people book me, there's a few of those. There's a few, multiple. But in this one time that I executed, I got the venue myself. We advertised, we sold the tickets. Bang. Got the bag. So it really, I already knew how important it was to create and to be enterprising as an entrepreneur, and not to be solely talent oriented. When you're talent oriented, you're waiting for someone to book you. You're waiting for someone to call. I'm just simply telling you, don't wait. Go and execute. Go and make it happen. And bet on yourself. Bet on yourself, but make small bets initially. Oftentimes, folks want to come out of the gate betting big on themselves, and they lose everything. They lose the shirts, and now they are discouraged. Now they are downtrodden. They are not motivated. They're not enthusiastic because they bet on themselves, but they bet the whole house. I'm not telling you to bet the whole house. I'm telling you to take small bets, small wins, get some momentum. Oftentimes, even in at church, oftentimes pastors will talk about David and David being a shepherd. And before he took out the great Goliath, before the prime time match in which he defeated the greatest enemy of them all, the most daunting, the most intimidating. Before this happens, pastors will tell you that on the backside of the mountain where there was no audience, where there was no crowd, where there was no bounty for eliminating the enemy. I was going to say another word, like what pirates. Do you know what pirates, the treasure that pirates have? You know what that's called? That's the word I was going to use. But before any of that, David was on the backside. I don't know if it was the mountain. I think people say mountain, but out in the fields, herding, shepherding sheep. And what did he encounter? He encountered a lion. Lions are very intimidating. Somebody was telling me about a trip. This guy took South Africa and they went out on a safari and the lion roared. And he said it shake the insides of his body. It was the most piercing, scary thing you've ever heard. A lion and a bear. There was a bear. Bears are so intimidating. Now they even have a bear that is using narcotics, the cocaine bear, right? Can you imagine how intimidating a bear on cocaine is? But that's what David saw. He didn't see the cocaine bear, but he was able to defend his sheep from a lion, from a bear. So he had the confidence. He had the wherewithal. He had the strength to defeat Goliath. And that's what I'm simply telling you. Get you some small wins, man. Get out here. Make things happen before you sell out a 400 seat. Let's get 50 people in a room. Let's sell 100 seats. Let's get some momentum. So put yourself on, man. I know it's easy. It's easier to wait to, we talk about generating. Here's an entrepreneur tip. People saying basically how to build an audience. There are 3 ways that you can build an audience. The first way is the way that everybody initially tries to do it. The majority. And it's organically. You're organically putting out great content. You're organically doing shows. You're organically selling homes. You're hoping that this sale leads to word of mouth where they tell their family member, their friends. Organically, you're trying to build an audience. So that's the one way. That's the first way that you can build an audience. The second way that you can build an audience, you can buy them. You can buy an audience. You can pay for an email list. You can pay for access to someone else's list. That's what I did for the show in Charlotte, Cornelius. I hired, matter of fact, my frat brother. I hired a guy. He does events in Charlotte. He has a list of thousands of people. So I paid him weekly to advertise my event. So you can buy your audience. You can pay for television ads. You can pay for radio spots. You can pay for newspaper spots. You can buy eyes on your product. If you know there's a big event, you want to sponsor it. You want to get your name in front of this particular audience. So you can organically, number one, grow your audience. Number 2, you can buy it. Or number 3, you can borrow. You can say, hey, who out here is doing something for the people that I ultimately want to service? And I can borrow. I can get on their stage, get in front of their people, have them to say, hey, this is a trusted friend of mine. This is someone who I highly respect. You should do business with them. That's what I did. That's what a lot of comedians do. I opened for other comics. John Chris, who is an uber successful, selling out large venues. I opened for John for years. So I just had to show up And be funny, I borrowed his audience. There were some folks that saw me on his show and was like, hey, I like what this guy's doing. Let me pay attention to that. But they didn't come there for me. They came there for John, but I appeared and they like, oh, I like what he does. So you can organically build your audience, you can buy your audience, or you can borrow your audience. What I'm telling you is to not bypass, but I'm telling you to create mechanisms where you can create an organic audience faster, quicker, better, where you're summoning them to you as opposed to going and opening for someone else. So put yourself on. Don't think about ideas for other people. Think about ideas for you. Fail fast, man. Get out there, make mistakes, fail fast. But put yourself on. And I would have wished someone would have told me this. I wish when I started my comedy career, because I wanted to be the guy. I wanted to, I was telling my sister recently, comedy is not like corporate America. You don't get promoted from the mailroom to associate to assistant manager to manager, and then you become like, that's not how it happens. It's and if it does happen like that's a long and tedious journey. But there's a better way. If someone would have told me for initially, hey, when you come, create things of value for folks to want to come and spend time with you. What I was doing, I was trying to get better, funnier, so that I can get more opportunities to open for people, to be on someone's tour, to be on someone's podcast, to be on someone's platform, versus creating my own platform and generating tremendous value so that people are like, oh man, I really like what this guy's doing. Let me get on board. Like this podcast, man. Imagine if I would have did my podcast 5 years ago, 6 years ago. But I'm sitting around looking at others, hoping that people would invite me. There's a podcast in particular. And I've toured with this individual where that was one of my goals. Like I wanted to be on their podcast. And then when I started touring with this person, they discontinued the podcast. They stopped the podcast. So I'm on the tour with the person. When you typically go on the tour with the person, you get to do the podcast. They stopped the podcast. We do the tour, go through COVID. They've restarted the podcast. I'm like, man, I wanted to be on that podcast. But now I have my own podcast, so I have to wait for an invitation. And again, it's beneficial when people offer you opportunities, when people are advocating for you, that's excellent. I'm just saying, don't sit around waiting. Don't sit around waiting for the ride. Start moving in the direction in which you're going. That's all I'm saying. Put yourself on. And that's today's best advice ever.